Oh, we already listed the house, Mom. You don't need 4 bedrooms for a recovery that might not even happen. Those were the first words I heard when the anesthesia finally cleared from my brain. My daughter Chloe was standing at the foot of my hospital bed. She wasn't holding flowers. I had just come out of a 3-hour surgery to repair a fracture. I was 72 years old, and for the first time in my life, I felt every single one of those years. "Is that a joke, Chloe?" I managed to whisper. My throat felt like it was filled with ground glass. Chloe sighed, a sharp, performative sound of annoyance. She adjusted her designer blazer. "No, Mom, it is a logical transition. Julian and I did the math. The maintenance on the Connecticut estate is $14,000 a month. That is $168,000 a year just to keep the pool heated and the hedges trimmed." "We found a wonderful place for you, Eleanor," Julian said. "Silver Oaks. It is a specialized care facility. They have 24-hour monitoring. It is much safer than you rattling around that big house alone. We already moved your essential items." My heart stuttered. My breath hitched in my chest. "You moved my things? Without asking me?" "You weren't in a state to be asked," Chloe snapped. She started pacing the small room. "You've been forgetful, Mom. The incident with the stove? The way you misplaced your pearl necklace? We had to step in. For your own good." The incident with the stove had been a faulty pilot light. The pearl necklace was in the safe deposit box at the bank, exactly where it belonged. They weren't worried about my health. They were building a narrative. I looked at the documents in Chloe's hand. The top page was a quitclaim deed. My eyes moved to the bottom of the page. There was a signature. Eleanor Vance. The loops of the E were wide. The cross on the T in my middle name was precise. It looked identical to my handwriting. But I knew. I knew because I hadn't signed a single piece of paper since the surgery was scheduled. I had been under heavy sedation for 48 hours. "I didn't sign that," I said. My voice was suddenly steady. The fog of the medication was being burned away by a cold, sharp clarity. Chloe didn't blink. "Of course you did, Mom. Last month. During tea. You said you wanted us to have the house so we could start the Content House project. You said you wanted to see us succeed. The Content House. Chloe's dream of a 24-hour filming location for her and her influencer friends. A 6 million mansion turned into a backdrop for 15-second dance videos." Julian leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a patronizing silkiness. "The notary already stamped it, Eleanor. It is a done deal. The house is in Chloe's name now. We've already accepted an offer on the secondary lot for $2.2 million to cover our startup costs." Startup costs. Or, more likely, Julian's gambling debts and Chloe's failing jewelry line. I looked at them both. My daughter, whom I had put through private schools and Ivy League universities. My son-in-law, whose career I had jump-started with a $500,000 loan that was never repaid. They were vultures. They were standing over my hospital bed, waiting for the spirit to leave my body so they could pick the bones clean. "I see," I said. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I had spent 40 years appraising rare antiques. I knew how to spot a fake, and I knew how to handle fragile things. Chloe and Julian were fragile. They were built on credit and lies. "I need to rest now," I added, closing my eyes. "Good," Chloe said, the relief in her voice palpable. "The transport van will be here at 6 a.m. tomorrow to take you to Silver Oaks. Don't worry about the house, Mom. We've already changed the codes." They left the room, their expensive shoes clicking rhythmically on the linoleum floor. I waited until the door clicked shut. I waited until I heard their muffled laughter fade down the hallway. Then I reached for my phone on the nightstand. "The surgery was a success, Arthur. But I have a different kind of problem. I need you to check the digital logs of my revocable living trust. Specifically, any transfers made in the last 48 hours. There was a silence on the other end. A long, heavy silence. 850,000 moved to a private holding company called CJS Ventures. I looked at the ceiling. The rage in my chest turned into something else, something sharper, something final. Arthur, I said, do we still have the morality clause embedded in the primary trust documents? I looked at the signature on the copy of the deed they had left on my tray. It was a very good imitation, almost perfect. But Julian was a junior partner at a mid-tier firm. He was used to dealing with people who were afraid of the law. He forgot one very important thing about me. The next morning, at exactly 6 a.m., 2 strangers in gray-blue uniforms arrived with a wheelchair. They said nothing, silently completing my discharge paperwork. I didn't resist. I let them wheel me out of the hospital and into a white van with no side windows. The place called Silver Oaks sat on the edge of town, tucked into an old industrial district. It had none of the lush green lawns or birdsong from the brochure Julian had shown me. Instead, there was the sharp stench of bleach mixed with spoiled food. My SIM card had been deactivated. Julian had thought of everything. He had cut off my communication, turning me into a ghost in the system. But he had overlooked one small detail. While packing my belongings, he had thrown away something he considered worthless. My old MP3 player from the 2000s. Then I connected the transmitter to a mini tablet hidden at the bottom of my suitcase. The screen lit up. I accessed the security system of my house in Connecticut. The image came through crystal clear. Chloe was holding a glass of champagne, laughing with a group of oddly dressed young people. They were dancing on my 80,000 Persian rug. Julian stood in the corner, holding a stack of invoices. Don't worry, I heard Julian's voice through the audio feed. The old woman will never get out of there. I signed a special care contract with visitation restrictions due to mental health reasons. We have at least 6 months to move all these antiques before the court can intervene. Oh, darling, you're a genius, Chloe said, taking a sip of wine. I just closed a $50,000 ad deal thanks to that "My Mom Has Dementia" story. I opened another secure app and entered the 16-digit encryption code for the Vance Trust. Arthur, I typed through the encrypted channel, initiate phase 1. I want all automatic payments on Chloe and Julian's platinum credit card suspended immediately. Reason: suspected identity fraud. Understood, Eleanor, Arthur replied within seconds. What about the house? Let them enjoy it a little longer, I typed, a faint, emotionless smile forming on my lips. I want them to feel like they're on top of the world before the ground disappears beneath their feet. At that moment, my door burst open. A large man with a hostile gaze walked in, carrying a tray of gray, watery porridge. Mrs. Vance, it's time to eat, he growled. And then it's time for your sedation. Your daughter said you have delusions about being wealthy. We'll help you forget that. He stepped closer, his rough hand reaching out to grab my shoulder. I looked him straight in the eye without a trace of fear. Your name is Miller, right? I turned on Miller's phone camera, pointing it at myself. Hello, Chloe. I hope you're enjoying the party, because it's the last one you'll ever throw with my money. I sent the video to Chloe's personal account. Then you can go back to pretending you didn't see anything. He handed it over without a word. I didn't call the police, not yet. Instead, I dialed a direct extension to the head of private banking at Julian's firm. Mr. Sterling's office? A young assistant answered. This is Eleanor Vance, I said. I am calling to report a massive compliance breach regarding the Vance Family Trust. Specifically, the unauthorized transfer of $850,000 into a shell company called CJS Ventures. I believe your junior partner, Julian Sterling, has committed felony wire fraud. The silence on the other end was delicious. Julian's firm prided itself on discretion, but they feared the IRS more than God. He would be blacklisted from every financial institution in the tri-state area. I handed the phone back to Miller. Check your account in 10 minutes. There will be a deposit from an offshore entity. Consider it a tip for your hospitality. Miller practically tripped over his own feet exiting the room. I turned my attention back to the mini tablet. On the security feed, the party at my house had turned into a scene of chaotic confusion. He looked at the screen of her phone, the video I had just sent from the nursing home. His face went from flushed red to a sickly ashen gray. How? She's drugged. She's supposed to be incapacitated, Julian hissed, his eyes darting around the room as if I were standing right behind him. She sent this from a different number, Julian. She knows about the money. Chloe was hyperventilating now, her influencer persona melting away to reveal the panicked, spoiled child underneath. Shut up. Julian grabbed her arm. It doesn't matter what she knows. The deed is signed. The cards are declined, he whispered, staring at his screen. Everything. The platinum, the business account, even the mortgage line. It's all frozen. What do you mean, frozen? Chloe shrieked. I have a shoot tomorrow. I need that $10,000 for the production crew. It's gone, Chloe. It's all gone. I leaned back against the thin, lumpy mattress of my hospital bed. The physical pain in my hip was still there, but it was being eclipsed by a profound sense of satisfaction. They thought they had stripped me of my dignity. Then the lights began to flicker. One by one, the smart locks on the front and back doors engaged with a heavy, metallic thud. "What's happening?" someone shouted from the living room. Then my voice came to the house-wide intercom system, clear, calm, and terrifyingly amplified. "Good evening, everyone," I said, my voice echoing off the marble floors I had polished for 20 years. "I hope you enjoyed the champagne. It cost $400 a bottle, and, unfortunately, the bill has just been charged to my daughter's personal liability account." Chloe froze. "It's an antique, and every drop you drink is adding another month to your prison sentence." Julian threw the bottle against the wall. It shattered, the 30-year-old liquid soaking into the white silk wallpaper. "You can't do this!" Julian yelled at the ceiling. "I have the papers! I have the deed!" "You have a forgery, Julian," I said softly. "And I have the original 4K footage of you signing my name while I was unconscious in the ICU. I installed the cameras in the hospital room myself, dear. They were trapped in my house, with my daughter and the man who had just ruined both of their lives." I closed the tablet and looked out the small, barred window of my room at Silver Oaks. The sun was setting, casting long orange shadows across the industrial wasteland. It was a beautiful view. "You're senile. You're sick. No one will believe a video from a crazy woman in a home." I watched her through the camera lens, my expression unreadable. I wasn't angry anymore. I was clinical. "Chloe, dear," I said through the intercom, my voice dropping to a whisper that echoed in the vaulted hall. "The notary you used? Mr. Henderson? He's been my personal bookkeeper for 20 years. Did you really think 5,000 would buy his loyalty? He called me the moment you left his office with that forged deed. He's already given his statement to the district attorney." Julian stopped pacing. The local police didn't need to kick it down. I had remotely unlocked it the second they pulled into the driveway. 6 officers swarmed the foyer. The influencer guests, the ones who had been filming their outfits of the day only minutes ago, were now filming their own arrests. The flashbulbs of their phones caught the glint of handcuffs. "Wait, There's a mistake, Chloe shrieked as an officer grabbed her arm. This is my house. I have the deed. And we have a remote witness waiting to give a statement. I adjusted the tablet on my lap in the dim light of my room at Silver Oaks. Officer, I said, my face appearing on the giant 85-inch 8K television in my living room, looming over the scene like a vengeful god. The man in the navy blazer is Julian Sterling. He is currently in possession of a stolen antique watch, a Patek Philippe that belonged to my husband. It's in his left pocket. And the woman is my daughter Chloe. Permanently. As they were led out in handcuffs, Julian turned back one last time. You'll die in that hole, Eleanor. You're stuck in Silver Oaks. You have nothing. I smiled. It was the first time I had smiled since the surgery. Julian, I bought Silver Oaks 20 minutes ago. The owner was in significant debt. I'm not a patient here anymore. I'm the landlord. And as for you, I've already arranged for your legal representation. A public defender. I hear they're very overworked this time of year. I swiped the screen, cutting the feed. The silence that followed was absolute. I looked around the small, cramped room. It was ugly. It was cold. But for the first time in a decade, it was clean. No more lies. No more parasites. I tapped a final command on my tablet. A message sent to my private security team. Bring the car. I'm going home. And call the cleaning crew. I want the scent of cheap scotch and betrayal scrubbed out of every corner of my house. I stood up, testing my hip. It hurt, but the pain was manageable. It was a physical reminder that I was still alive, still standing, and still in control. I walked toward the door of my room. Miller was standing there, his eyes wide. He held the door open for me, bowing slightly as I passed. Your car is out front, Mrs. Vance, he whispered. Thank you, Miller, I said, handing him a folded 100 bill. Until the kitchen, the porridge was disgusting. Fix it. I expect better from my employees. I walked out of the facility and into the crisp night air. My black town car was idling at the curb, its headlights cutting through the dark like twin sabers. The war was won, but the audit was just beginning. The town car purred as we pulled away from the rusted gates of Silver Oaks. I watched the facility shrink in the rearview mirror, a gray monument to the misery Chloe and Julian had intended for me. My driver, a silent man named Elias who had worked for my husband for 2 decades, didn't ask questions. He was running a side hustle with a high-interest predatory lender. He's underwater for $1.4 million. That's why he was so desperate to flip your estate. I watched the dark trees of the Connecticut countryside blur past. $1.4 million. My son-in-law had sold my soul for the price of a mid-sized yacht. And Chloe? I asked. She's in holding. She's already tried to call her publicist 3 times. She doesn't realize her publicist was the one who leaked the arrest video to the tabloids. What complication? Julian didn't just forge your name on the deed. He took out a bridge loan against your antique collection. He used the 17th century Ming vases as collateral. The lender is a man named Silas Thorne. He's not a banker. He's a shark. And he's currently at your house, claiming he has a legal right to seize the collection since Julian defaulted this afternoon. I felt a cold prickle of anticipation. Silas Thorne. I knew the name. He was a bottom feeder in the art world, someone who bought debt just to strip estates of their treasures. How long until we arrive? I asked Elias. 5 minutes, ma'am. Arthur, I said back into the phone, call the local sheriff. Tell them we have a secondary trespasser. The police cruisers were still there, their lights painting the white stone of the mansion in rhythmic strobes of red and blue. But parked right at the front steps was a matte black SUV. I stepped out of the car, leaning slightly on my cane. The night air was sharp, smelling of pine and the lingering ozone of the storm that had passed. A man in a sharp charcoal suit was standing on my porch, arguing with a deputy. He held a clipboard and looked entirely too comfortable. "I have a signed lien," the man, Thorne, was shouting.
"The owner of this property signed over the collateral. Move aside." I walked up the steps, the tap, tap, tap of my cane echoing on the stone. The deputy looked at me with relief. "Mr. Thorne, I presume?" I said, my voice cutting through his shouting like a razor. Thorne turned. He looked me up and down, his eyes landing on my hospital wristband, which I had purposefully left on. He smirked. "And you must be the incompetent mother. Look, lady, your son-in-law owed me a lot of money. I'm just here for what's mine." He reached out toward the heavy oak front door. "You cannot take collateral from someone who has zero equity." "The paperwork says otherwise," Thorne sneered, waving his clipboard. "The paperwork was signed by a man currently sitting in a jail cell for forgery," I countered, "which makes your lien about as valuable as the paper it's printed on. Furthermore, I've just purchased your debt, Mr. Thorne." Thorne blinked. "What?" "Your company, Thorne Holdings? You take out massive loans to fund your acquisitions, don't you? Well, I had a very productive conversation with your primary creditor while I was in the car. They were quite concerned to hear you were involved in an elder abuse scandal. I bought your outstanding debt for 80 cents on the dollar. I stepped closer to him, my face inches from his. I could smell his expensive cologne and the sweat of sudden fear." "Which means," I continued, "I am now your landlord, your banker, and your worst nightmare. You have 60 seconds to get off my property before I call in your loans and bankrupt you by sunrise." Thorne stared at me, his mouth hanging open. He looked at the deputy, who was now resting a hand on his holster. Without a word, Thorne turned, scrambled into his SUV, and tore down the driveway, his tires screaming against the gravel. I turned to the deputy. "Thank you, officer. I believe I can take it from here." I walked into my house. The foyer was a mess. Broken glass, spilled liquor, and the lingering scent of Chloe's heavy perfume. I looked at the spot on the floor where my daughter had begged for mercy. The same daughter who had tried to lock me away in a dark room to die. I didn't feel sad. I felt a strange, quiet peace. I walked to the sideboard and picked up a small, silver-framed photograph of Chloe as a child. She was smiling, her arms wrapped around my neck. I looked at it for a long moment. Then I turned the frame face down. "Elias?" I called out. "Yes, Mrs. Vance?" "Call the contractor. I want this entire floor remodeled. Everything. I want the floors ripped up. I want the walls repainted. I want every trace of their presence erased." I walked toward the stairs, my hip aching, but my heart steady. "And Elias?" "Yes, ma'am?" "Send a bouquet of lilies to the jail tomorrow. For Chloe. Make sure the card says, 'I hope you like the aesthetic of the common room. It's the only brand you have left.'" I reached the top of the stairs and didn't look back. The next morning, the sun crawled over the Connecticut horizon, bleeding orange and gold across the manicured lawn. I sat in my sunroom, the surgical incision in my hip, a dull thrum of reality against the cold perfection of my surroundings. On the mahogany table before me sat a tablet, a stack of legal briefs, and a single lukewarm cup of Earl Grey. "The press is gathered at the gates, Eleanor," Arthur said over the speakerphone. "They've picked up the story. The socialite who sold her mother. It's brutal. The comments on Chloe's last post are being moderated by a bot, but it can't keep up with the tide. I watched a sparrow land on the stone fountain outside. And Julian? His firm officially filed a lawsuit against him this morning for reputational damage and misappropriation of client trust. They aren't just firing him, they are stripping him of his pension. He's looking at 10 to 15 years if the DA plays hardball. And based on the evidence we provided, the DA is feeling very ambitious.
I took a slow, methodical sip of my tea. The bitter bergamot grounded me. Has Chloe called? 42 times from the jail's recorded line, Arthur replied. The transcripts are pathetic.
She alternates between screaming that you're a monster and begging you to pay her bail so she can fix her image. She actually asked if you could send her skincare kit to the holding cell. I felt a ghost of a smile haunt my lips. It wasn't a smile of joy. It was the grim satisfaction of a restorer seeing a layer of filth stripped away from a masterpiece. Do not answer, I said. In fact, I want her bail increased. File a motion citing her as a flight risk. She has followers all over the world, doesn't she? Surely one of them. Compose her. Consider it done. Also, the forensic accountants found something else in Julian's private server. It seems he was planning to put you under a limited guardianship permanently. He had already drafted the medical certificates. He just needed a doctor to sign off on your cognitive decline. I tightened my grip on the delicate porcelain handle of my teacup. And did he find one? He was close. A Dr. Eris at the clinic. He'd been promised a donation to his research fund, $200,000. By the clinic, Arthur, I said, my voice dropping an octave. Buy it by noon. I want Dr. Eris in my foyer by 3 o'clock. I want him to explain to me, in person, exactly when he decided my life was worth a research grant. Eleanor, that might be seen as... It will be seen as an acquisition, Arthur. I am an appraiser. I see a failing asset, and I liquidate it. Dr. Eris is a failing asset. I hung up before he could argue. The rest of the morning was a symphony of destruction and rebirth. I watched from my window as a moving truck arrived. Not to take my things, but to haul away the content Chloe had brought into my home. The ring lights, the neon signs, the racks of fast fashion clothes, all of it was tossed into the back of the truck like industrial waste. I walked to the foyer, my cane clicking rhythmically on the marble. The cleaning crew was already at work, scrubbing the walls where Julian had shattered the scotch. The smell of ammonia was sharp and cleansing. At exactly 3 p.m., the doorbell rang. Elias opened the door to reveal a man in a lab coat looking frantic. Dr. Eris. He was sweating despite the air conditioning. He looked at me, then at the 2 men in dark suits standing behind my chair. Mrs. Vance, he stammered. There's been a misunderstanding, I was told. I was under the impression that your family was concerned for your safety. Sit down, doctor, I said, gesturing to the chair where Julian had sat when he told me I was going to a home. Eris sat, his knees knocking together. I have your signed affidavit of incompetence right here, I said, sliding a piece of paper across the table. It's dated yesterday, the day I was outsmarting a federal prosecutor and dismantling a $1.4 million fraud scheme. Tell me, doctor, what part of that sounds like advanced senility to you? I hadn't performed the final evaluation yet, Eris whispered. Julian said, Julian is a felon, I cut him off. And you are a participant in a conspiracy to kidnap and defraud a senior citizen. I now own 51 of your medical practice. As of 5 minutes ago, your board of directors has voted to revoke your clinical privileges pending a criminal inquiry. The doctor's face turned the color of ash. Please, I have a family. I have a career. So did I said, leaning forward, until you tried to help my daughter bury me alive. You didn't see a patient, doctor. You saw a payday. Well, here is your payment. You will go to the district attorney's office right now. You will give a full, sworn statement against Julian and Chloe. You will tell them every lie they told you, every bribe they offered. I stood up, the pain in my hip a sharp reminder of why I was doing this. If you do that, I continued, I might let you keep your medical license. If you don't, I will spend every penny of the Vance Trust to ensure you never even work as a pharmacist's assistant again. Do we have an understanding? Eris nodded so hard I thought his glasses would fall off. He scrambled out of the house, nearly tripping over his own feet. I turned to Elias. Is the garden ready? Yes, ma'am. The roses have been pruned. The toxic varieties have been removed, as you requested. I walked out to the veranda. The air was sweet, the scent of lavender and fresh earth rising to meet me. For years, I had let the weeds grow. I had let my daughter's ego and my son-in-law's greed choke the life out of this family. I looked at my phone. One final notification. An eviction notice. Not for me, for Chloe's creative studio in the city. I had signed the order an hour ago. Lies, I whispered to the wind. All lies. And then, for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight lift. The house was quiet. The bank was secure. And the karma was instant. The silence of the house was finally a luxury, not a symptom of isolation. I spent the next 48 hours in a state of cold, clinical observation. On my tablet, I watched the digital footprint of Chloe Vance Sterling vanish like a sandcastle in a hurricane. Her sponsors pulled out. Her management issued a statement distancing themselves from her appalling legal situation. By the third morning, the final trap was ready to spring. Arthur arrived at 10 o'clock sharp, carrying a leather briefcase that contained the death warrants for Julian's career and Chloe's freedom. The district attorney is ready, Eleanor, Arthur said, placing a single gold-plated pin on the table. Julian has attempted to flip on Chloe. He's claiming she was the mastermind, that she forged the signatures and he merely notarized them in good faith. He's trying to save his own skin by throwing your daughter under the bus. I didn't flinch. I had raised Chloe. I knew she had no loyalty. I had married Julian into the family. I knew he had no spine. And Chloe? She's hysterical. She's telling the investigators that Julian abused her into signing the documents. It's a race to see who can betray the other faster. Let them run, I said. But remind the DA that I have the hospital footage. I have the audio from the smart home intercom. I have the paper trail of the offshore accounts. I don't need a confession from either of them. I have the truth. I signed the final affidavit. The ink was black, thick, and permanent. There is one more thing, Arthur hesitated. Chloe's publicist reached out. They want to know if you'll settle for a private family mediation. They've offered to have Chloe check into a rehab facility for social media addiction if you drop the charges of financial elder abuse. They think they can spin this as a mental health crisis. I looked at the pen in my hand. A mental health crisis? When they were measuring my coffin while I was still breathing? No, Arthur. Tell them the bank is closed. Tell them I don't negotiate with terrorists, even the ones I gave birth to. That afternoon, I drove to the county jail, not to bail her out, not to offer a hug. I wanted to see the look in her eyes when the realization of forever finally set in. The visiting room was a grim, windowless box. Chloe was let in by a guard. She looked unrecognizable. Her hair was greasy, her designer skin was breaking out, and she was wearing a standard-issue orange jumpsuit that cost less than one of her lipsticks. Mom! She lunged toward the glass, her hands smearing the surface. Thank God. You have to get me out of here. Julian is lying. He's telling them it was all my idea. He's trying to pin the forgery on me. I sat down slowly, resting my cane against the plastic chair.
I didn't pick up the phone. I just looked at her. "Mom!"
"Pick up the phone!" she screamed, her voice muffled by the thick plexiglass. I waited. 1 minute. 2. I watched her devolve from desperation to rage to a hollow, pathetic sobbing. Finally, I picked up the receiver. "Hello, Chloe," I said. My voice was a flat line. "Mom, please. I'm your only daughter. You can't let me stay here. Think about what people will say. Think about the family name." "The family name is Vance, Chloe," I said. "You stopped being a Vance the moment you decided I was a hurdle to be jumped over. You're a Sterling now." "And the Sterlings are currently bankrupt, indicted, and universally loathed." "I was just trying to build something for us," she wailed. "The house was too big for you. You were going to get sick eventually." "I was sick, Chloe. I had surgery. And while I was in pain, you were picking out new wallpaper for my bedroom. You didn't want to care for me. You wanted to curate me." I leaned in closer to the glass. "I've spent 40 years appraising things. I know when a piece is too damaged to be restored. You are a broken vessel, Chloe. There is no glue strong enough to fix what you've done." "You're a monster," she hissed, her face contorting. "You're going to die alone in that big, empty house." "I'd rather die alone in a house that belongs to me than live one more second with a parasite like you," I replied. "By the way, I've sold your creative studio. I've also liquidated your trust fund to pay back the $850,000 Julian stole. You have a balance of exactly 14.22 in your commissary account. Use it wisely. I hear the soap here is quite harsh." I hung up the phone. I didn't look back as the guard dragged her away, screaming my name. I walked out into the cold gray parking lot, the wind whipping my coat around my legs. Julian's trial was set for next month. He would lose. Chloe's trial would follow. She would lose. The law was a slow, grinding machine, but I had supplied the fuel to make it run hot. When I got back to the estate, the contractors were already there. They had ripped out the marble floors in the foyer. The house was a skeleton of wood and dust. "Mrs. Vance?" the lead contractor asked. "We found a hidden compartment under the floorboards in the library. Julian must have missed it." He handed me a small, rusted metal box. I opened it. Inside were the original deeds to the property, the ones my husband had told me to hide, just in case. And beneath them, a letter Julian had written to a creditor 6 months ago, outlining his plan to dispose of me. Evidence. The final nail in the coffin. I sat in the middle of my hollowed-out house and laughed. It wasn't a bitter laugh. It was the laugh of a woman who had finally cleared the clutter. Lies. All lies. But the truth was worth every penny. The final blow didn't come from a courtroom or a headline. It came from a single, certified letter, delivered to the county jail at 4 p.m. I was sitting in my newly renovated library, the scent of fresh cedar and beeswax replacing the stale odor of Julian's expensive scotch. The house was quiet now. No thumping bass from Chloe's parties. No hissed arguments in the hallway about interest rates and credit limits. Just the ticking of a grandfather clock that had seen 3 generations of Vances. "It's done, Eleanor," Arthur said, his voice coming through the house speakers. The judge signed the permanent restraining order. "Neither Chloe nor Julian can come within 500 yards of this property, or you, for the next 25 years. Not that they'll be able to. Julian took a plea deal this morning." I watched the steam rise from my tea. "How many years?" 12, in a federal facility. He gave up everything. The names of the offshore fixers, the shady lenders, even the doctor.
He tried to cut a deal to testify against Chloe, but the DA didn't need him. They have your recordings. And my daughter? I asked, my voice devoid of emotion.
She's been formally charged with 3 counts of felony wire fraud and 1 count of aggravated financial elder abuse. Her public defender tried to argue for house arrest. The judge laughed. He cited the video of her celebrating your dementia while drinking your vintage cellar.
Her trial starts in 60 days. She's looking at 8 to 10. I looked at the small, silver-framed photo of Chloe I had turned face down weeks ago. I picked it up and walked to the fireplace. The embers were glowing a deep, vengeful orange. She called again, didn't she? I asked. Yes. She wants to apologize. She says she's found herself in the holding cell. She wants to start a foundation for elderly rights when she gets out. She's already asking for a ghostwriter for her memoir. I tossed the photo into the heart of the fire. The wood frame blackened instantly.
The image of the smiling little girl curled and hissed before vanishing into gray ash.
She hasn't found herself, Arthur, I said. She's just looking for a new script. Tell the jail to block my number. I don't want to hear her voice ever again. Not even in a recording.
I stood up, my hip feeling stronger than it had in years. The physical therapist said my recovery was miraculous. I told him it wasn't a miracle, it was a mission. You don't stay down when there are predators in your living room. I walked to the foyer. The new floor was a deep, dark walnut. It was solid. It didn't creak. It didn't hide secrets. Elias stood by the door, holding my coat. The car is ready, Mrs. Vance. The airport? Yes, Elias. Italy. I think I've spent enough time in this house for one lifetime. I stopped at the threshold and looked back at the grand staircase. For years I had been a ghost in this mansion, a provider of funds and a silent witness to my own erasure. I had let them turn me into a relic. But I wasn't a relic. I was the appraiser, and I had finally determined the true value of my family. 0. I stepped out onto the porch. The Connecticut air was crisp, tasting of the coming winter. I saw a small group of reporters still lingering at the end of the driveway, their long lenses pointed at the house like snipers. I didn't hide. I didn't pull my collar up. I stood at the top of my stone steps, tall and steady, and looked directly into the cameras. I wanted them to see the face of the woman who didn't break. I wanted Chloe to see it on the news in the prison common room. "Mrs. Vance," one reporter shouted, "do you have a statement for your daughter?" I waited for the silence to settle. I waited until the only sound was the wind in the bare trees. "I have no daughter," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the crisp air. "I have a house, I have my health, and I have the truth. Everything else was just a forgery." I got into the back of the town car. As we drove past the gates, I saw a final eviction notice taped to the stone pillar. Not for a tenant, but a legal notice that the Vance estate was now a private sanctuary, closed to the public and the past. The car moved smoothly toward the highway. My tablet chimed with a final notification from the bank. The $850,000 had been fully recovered, plus interest seized from Julian's liquidated assets. Perfect. I closed the screen and looked out at the rolling hills. The karma wasn't just a headline or a feeling. It was a balance sheet that finally added up. Money can't buy dignity, but it can certainly fund the walls that keep the toxic world away. I leaned back into the leather seat and closed my eyes. For the first time in 30 years, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt like victory.